I'm here with Lauren Ashcraft, and she's running in New York's 12th congressional district against Carolyn Maloney. You are a Democratic socialist,
Yes.
and you support Medicare for all, and you have a really cool idea about getting money out of politics. And thank you for being with me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So first, I think we should talk about the pandemic, since
Yeah.
we're both in New York.
Yes.
Um, how are you holding up? How are things on your end?
Yeah, I think so. Our teams moved to 100% virtual, and I'm just really humbled to see what a fast transition they've made. And we've also transitioned into doing wellness calls and checking in with people and seeing if they need anything, and then, getting groceries if they request it, that kind of thing. So it's been really an honor to be part of this team and the effort of helping our neighbors where we can still. And personally, I'm doing fine, keeping on a routine, and it does help that we're all staying really busy and productive during this time, because I know that kind of helps to mitigate the fact that you're stuck in a very small apartment indefinitely. So
Yes, that is true. And I mean, the news is seemingly always bad. uh,
yeah, it's scary. I think as of today, over 60 MTA workers have died. Multiple doctors, nurses, physicians assistants, just like it's just really frustrating to see that essential workers are putting their lives on the line for us, and our representatives can't even do the bare minimum of making sure that they have the protective gear that they need to stay safe. In addition to that, they should have hazard pay and benefits like health insurance.
right.
Um, and instead of just doing it in piecemeal, that's why I'm for Medicare for all.
So that's something that we could get into is the fact that there isn't enough protective gear to go around. As you know, the Democratic presidential primary is effectively over. Although we can
Yeah.
get into your petition in a little bit, but uh, the candidate who won was also the one who voted for PNTR, which normalized trade relations with China. And today that's very relevant because a lot of that medical equipment is and protective gear is manufactured in China,
Hmm.
which happens to be the first country that got hit with the coronavirus. Um, so, as somebody who would be coming into a new Congress, you would be part of a new Congress and hopefully a blank slate. Um, what would you do to ensure that we would shore up supply chains for these for this equipment?
Yeah, so a lot of the trade deals, unfortunately, have just provided an atmosphere where there's race to the bottom wages, and we're forced to shut businesses down here because there's no way that we can produce goods as cheaply as other countries can. Um, and it's just so many instances of putting profit before people in every single way, the whole way up and down the supply chain. And we're seeing that now. And also in the fact that we had supplies that got sent to other countries, and we had supplies that got lost, and supplies that went bad and dysfunctional. And it's just, we're just seeing that we were so vastly unprepared in so many ways, and it left us all exposed to multiple dangers of this pandemic. Economically, physical safety, our health has been at risk, and essential workers literally are putting their lives at risk to do their jobs. And that is, working at a grocery store and being a janitor in hospitals right now. There are so many people. One of the people that I called the other day while doing a wellness check in my community is a caretaker that cares for disabled people. And unfortunately, he's sent to work every day without masks because his company doesn't have any. So in so many ways, it's like, yes, we're also putting essential workers at risk, but also everyone that they come in contact with as well. So the people that he is taking care of as part of his job are also being exposed. So it just goes to show, whenever I look at what our administration is talking about right now, I hear like, let's get the economy going again. Let's lower agricultural workers' pay so that there's still profit in the agricultural sector, and like this and that. I just hear profit, profit, profit. And now, of all times, we should be thinking about lives. Like, where are all these pro-life people that should be standing up for people getting masks to wear to the grocery store so they don't die? So everyone who goes to the grocery store doesn't die as well.
When you would be in a position, theoretically, to change it. I mean, obviously, as a freshman congresswoman, your power would be limited, but you would be among a governing body that has power to change it. But do you see currently any will to fundamentally change the structure of our system so that a future pandemic or whatever the future crisis is doesn't hit us so hard?
No. Like the only people that I see really speaking truth to it are the people like AOC and the squad. But the people that are like, hey, like, where are our representatives? Why are they on recess right now? They shouldn't be. This is not the time to be taking off. And just the fact that this relief bill passed as it is. And at best, people are going to get $1,200 to help them out for a very long, very serious pandemic and economic crisis, while major corporations have huge loans that are available to them. And even small businesses are having difficulty getting any kind of help because that money is being snatched up by huge businesses that have a financial team that knows exactly how to navigate this kind of application. But if you're a mom and pop store that isn't used to doing things like that, and you don't have a lawyer at your disposal, then you're struggling. So it's just this huge cycle that these politicians that aren't putting their necks out and fighting for people, they're the ones that are getting all this money from these huge corporations. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's why they're not fighting for us, is because they're pretty comfortable getting the help that they need from their corporate friends.
Now,
And yeah.
so you do have a policy that would address this, at least in
Yeah.
theory, and I'd like to talk about that. I believe your idea is to have a box on your tax return that you could check off and get $100 that you could spend on an election. And for politicians to be able to accept that money, they would have to reject corporate and PAC money.
Yeah.
Uh, so I did want to ask, how do you, because obviously getting corporate and sorry, I had something in front of me. I frequently just make random gestures with my no. But in order to get money out of politics, getting corporate and PAC money out is very important.
Mhm.
But I would say that the real root of the problem goes back to 1976, a decision in Buckley versus Vallejo, where the court held that spending money is a protected form of speech under the
Mhm.
First Amendment. So the ability for just wealthy people in general to throw money at an election, I think, is equally perverse
Mhm.
and corrupting as a corporation that person happens to be tied to or own. So, what additional steps could we take?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Ultimately, the best thing that could happen to electoral politics is public financing, period. So the best thing that could happen is that big money is completely out of politics in general, and it's people powered. And I know in New York City, if you're running for city office, there's a matching program, and you have to meet a certain threshold, and then the city is able to match your donations. And there are regulations like the size of donations that come in. I think that's a really great way that we could go. And if we care about our democracy, then we should care about getting the most people-powered representatives into office. And the whole thing is, whenever I look at this crisis, we should be focusing on the people rather than corporations. And people hold purchasing power, and people hold the economy. So if we give the power and purchasing power and strength back to the people, then that will trickle up. But we've never tried that. In the history of our politics and economics and in government, it's always been that we hand all this money to the top and hope that it trickles down, and it has never once worked. So I mean, it just keeps going back to the fact of what you said is politicians are paying the most attention to their huge donors, whether that's corporate PACs, super PACs, or billionaires. And we absolutely need to move very far away from that as quickly as possible.
So to sort of shift gears, you have a petition to make sure that the Democratic presidential primary continues in New York and isn't canceled by the governor. What is the logic there to cancel the presidential primary? I mean, congressional primaries are still going to happen. Mm-hmm. So why take that off of the ballot?
So I have my guesses. So the thing is, it's not a safety precaution because the governor has already mentioned that we can all have absentee ballots. So it's not a matter of keeping us home. And as you mentioned, congressional and state and local races are that day anyway. So the even crazier thing is that there have already been ballots that have been printed, to my knowledge, that have the presidential line on there. So it's actually going to cost us money to take that off, reprint everything, and deprive people of their voice. So on our end as people and voters, this is going to negatively impact the number of delegates that we have. If you are supportive of any candidate other than Biden, this whole presidential primary, you're going to lose delegates. And that's the way that we have any kind of influence on the national platform. So even though our candidate, we pretty much know is not moving on and not going to be the nominee, it still really matters that we get to decide what happens with those delegates. So it's really disappointing. It's depriving people of their voting rights, and there's no logical reason that I can think of. So, I mean, I'm a Bernie supporter, and I see it as a way to limit our voice. And the same would if I were, a diehard Warren, Yang, or Buttigieg supporter, I would be equally mad because every single delegate you have matters. So
arguably, there's less of a difference between the Buttigieg and Biden crowds than.
That's true.
But
yeah.
But yeah, I can see that. I can see why you would form that petition. And how many signatures do you have at this moment?
I believe it's about 1,300 right now, 1,300 and counting. And we're actually going to send the letter itself to Cuomo and the BOE tomorrow. And we've gathered about, I believe it's 30 either elected officials or candidates running for office signatures on that as well. So we're hoping that we get heard, and we're really not pushing to endanger anybody. The election's going to happen anyway. I'm on the ballot. So if I'm on the ballot, then Bernie should be as well.
What do you think about the job that Cuomo's doing generally,
Mm,
in terms of managing the pandemic? Because New York is a state that expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. Arguably, Cuomo got on this as early as public health officials were suggesting
mhm.
he should. Um, but overall, what do you think?
That's a great question. I'm mixed on his performance. I know that he gives great press briefings that are educating people, but that's not really what I'm looking for in a governor. Um, the truth is, Medicaid is being cut right now for New Yorkers. There are protections for people who own homes, but not for people who rent. And in New York City, in the 12th congressional district, over 70% of people are renters. So where's the help for us? And it just goes to show, like, I can't afford to buy anything. So the people that are being helped right now are the people who can. Um, yeah. So it's over and over again, it's people, working class people, not getting the help that they need while the 1% in corporations do. And yeah, I see that over and over. And to me, being a governor is not about press briefings. I know that there are also disagreements between de Blasio and Cuomo regarding, I know de Blasio wants to keep schools shut for the rest of the year, and Cuomo kind of said, like, oh, that's your opinion. I actually, for for the first time in a while, agree with de Blasio in the fact that if we can't see the end to this crisis, and I know that it's very stressful for parents to have kids at home learning virtually right now, and there's a lot of questions that aren't answered about students that don't have laptops and don't have access to the internet, which is a separate problem which we should address anyway. But we don't want to put people's lives at risk by forcing students to physically go to the same place every single day before we have super control over this pandemic. And from what I understand, we're not going to really have control over the pandemic until there's a vaccination that's available to the public. And it could come around and make a second wave. Um, we don't really know that answer. So I'm going to have to agree with de Blasio here in that people's safety comes first. And secondarily, we should be figuring out how to ensure that everyone has access to the internet, because it should be a human right. You really can't succeed in today's society without it. And every school should have enough laptops to ensure that students who don't have one at home can take one home in this circumstance and so many other circumstances as well. So I have ideas about how schools are funded as well. And this is all just, everything's so connected. And this pandemic is highlighting all the holes that we've had throughout our entire system that just leaves everyone at risk economically, academically, physically as well.
Incidentally, Cuomo just said that this crisis does not prove that our healthcare system is fundamentally flawed, just that we need better preparation um, beforehand. But I have been hearing that there is no end in sight. That actually, I've been talking to a few medical professionals, and the consensus generally is pretty bleak.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that as a New Yorker, it's pretty rough hearing that from the governor, when
Yeah.
every day and every night I just count the sirens.
Yes.
um, Count the sirens. They have the makeshift morgues, freezer trucks full of bodies. I saw a video, mass graves now
Yeah.
too. And I mean, it could make a second wave until we have a vaccine. I think you're absolutely right. And gosh, it's really refreshing to hear a candidate for public office sort of have a realistic take on this, that there are
Yeah.
systemic flaws.
Yeah, totally. And it's traumatic for our society. Like, we're not going to get over this psychologically very quickly either. I don't know what our representatives think, and maybe it's because a lot of them are multimillionaires themselves. But a lot of us don't live in that kind of a bubble, and a lot of people have lost their jobs, a lot of people have lost loved ones, and there's extra trauma being added on to this because people are isolated. If you did lose a loved one, it's likely that you didn't really get to say goodbye properly. I know there's a lot of concern about religious burials and people not being, you know, there's not a really good way to do that if so many people are dying at once, and funeral homes aren't accepting people that have passed away because of the pandemic. There's so many things that are traumatizing our whole society all at once, and the least we can do is make sure that people have their basic needs met, and we're not even doing that. So yeah, Medicare for all, if you're not on board as of today, I have a lot of questions, because I know that, you know, even Biden is saying that COVID treatment should be paid for, but like,
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
yeah, where do you draw the line? There are people who are going to have severe PTSD because their loved one died from COVID, but they don't have it. So where's their treatment? Yeah, there's so many people that are being affected in so many ways that aren't specifically them having COVID, that I just have a lot of questions for anyone who doesn't think that this is the absolute necessary next step, is to push for Medicare for all.
Yeah, it's I mean, it is it for people who watch this interview, I really do want to impress upon you that living in New York, there are sirens going all the time, and I mean, there are usually sirens that you hear occasionally throughout the day, but not like this. Um, and nobody, people are, not on the side on the streets. They're not driving. I mean, it's scary. It's
Mm-hmm.
scary living here, and being in I think I have about a 600 square foot apartment with my fiance, and
Mm-hmm.
being confined in that space is difficult. But like, it's I mean, it's something else. It's like out of a nightmare.
Yes, it really is. Like, when we've been out to deliver groceries to people who need help, we're looking around like, this is crazy. Like, it's nothing I've ever seen before. I'm in the middle of Long Island City, and there's nobody. Like, if I look out the window, there's nobody. There's just rows of taxis parked, just because nobody's using them. It's a completely different world. And I would have never imagined that this would be happening right now. But now that it is, we have to prep for it to happen. Who's to say that some new virus isn't going to come out next year? We have to prep for this and make sure that our society doesn't have the holes that that we're all being exposed to right now.
Yeah, I mean, we between the supply chain problem and the fact that people can't afford to take off work, they can't afford to see a doctor even if
Mm-hmm.
if they're covered.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these problems make us all vulnerable.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, it's very good to be able to sort of vent this, but like, uh, it sort of feels like we are a failing country, or a country on the verge of failure,
Yeah.
um, because these kinds of holes do not exist in a healthy society.
No, even like Germany, really, really early on in the crisis, had like freelance pay. Like, if you are a freelancer gig worker, they had pay ready for you. And I don't understand why we call ourselves a first world country if we're so far behind all the other ones. Like, South Korea has been testing people since pretty much the beginning of this, and has been able to detect who has a fever based on the technology that they have. And we just don't have this infrastructure, and we don't have a healthcare system that if we all, if we all get sick at once, we can't handle it. We already can't. People are sharing ventilators or can't get access to them if they need one. Um, it's just really astounding. And these are countries that have universal health care as well, and we don't
Right.
have that.
Right. They're even struggling, and so what hope do we have? I mean, and I do see this argument a lot, that if the right people were in charge, if we had just taken preparations back in January, made preparations back in January when we knew this problem was coming, we could be in a lot better position than we are now. And I feel like while that may be true, there's no way that we would not eventually reach this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe we're 2 weeks behind, and maybe that makes a difference for thousands of people, and that I'm not discounting that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like when you have these holes, these systemic holes that people fall through, uh, we're still dealing in thousands of deaths.
Totally.
And how can that be worth it? um
Yeah, it's really like I feel like we're on this cliff, and it's like down the cliff is like a revolution of some sort, and I don't really know what it looks like. But like we've been pushed so far that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's so clear that keeping us alive is not the priority of the majority of people representing us. And we're to the breaking, people are getting their lives risked because they're essential workers. Everyone's life is at risk in a pandemic when your government hasn't prepared at all. And I just feel like we're on the verge of something, and I don't really know what it is, but like this is pushing us there.
I mean, obviously the answer, I feel like I know the answer, but are you afraid?
Um, Honestly, it's a tough question. Yeah, I don't really know what it looks like. I don't know if afraid is the right word. I'm not, um, it's not good. It's really not good. It's scary. And I don't know if I'm personally afraid, but I'm angry. And I haven't seen the steps being taken that need to be taken to protect us. And I could have never imagined, like, this is a lot of our first times running for office, and to have something so serious hit our country that has the ability, I mean, it's already killed more people than 9/11, and it's going to do more damage to our economy than the Great Depression. Like, these this is really bad. And our postal system is at risk, our agricultural sector is at risk, um, our healthcare system is at risk, everyone going to work right now is at risk, and I don't see how any of it is sustainable. And I know we can do some things that can help us take steps to protect people in the meantime, but a lot of it's too late. And like, I want to see representatives planning for the next crisis right now, because they haven't had a plan that was able to put us in a better position now. I want to see each and every person screaming that we need Medicare for all who's representing us. And if not, I want them to be clear about the fact that they are being bought by private health insurance. And I just, I'm angry. I think that's the best way to describe it. I think, yeah, I'm really upset.
I think you and I are the same age. I'm 31.
Yep.
Yeah. So, we came up, and as we were growing up, I feel like we were all sort of told that, don't worry, you get your education, you're going to be prosperous, you'll be just like your parents, or you'll do better than your parents, and the world is your oyster. It's great. You're young and you're whatever. And we have, in our lifetimes, we have now lived. I mean, we were born and the wall fell.
Yeah.
We years, like 12 years later, my math is probably wrong. The towers fell.
Yeah.
The oceans flooded New Orleans. Um, the economy collapsed.
Yes. We
And now,
graduated into that.
yeah, we graduated college right into this, and now the global economy is collapsing under the weight of a pandemic.
Mm.
Um, and the response is the default: what is good for global capital is good for the consumer, and so we're going to bail out the businesses. We're not going to talk about supply chain issues. I have yet to see a substantive discussion about how trade policies have left us vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to talk about Medicare for all. Now is not the time to be pushing for universal coverage for people. We can deal with mitigation. And the thing is, if we're constantly playing catch up, and these crises keep hitting us, where does that lead? I hear you when you say I'm angry. I'm right there with you. I'm also terrified.
Yeah.
But I got to imagine that running for office, it puts a double strain on you, because you have to campaign digitally against an incumbent who's been there for years.
Mm.
I think she was elected in 2013. Is that?
She's been there for 26, going on 27 years.
Never mind. Sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies.
No, not at all. It's surprising because whenever, we're not really doing this now. We're doing mostly wellness checks whenever we call people. But whenever we were knocking on doors, one of the questions we asked is, do you know who your representative is? More than 9 times out of 10, people said no. And I think about, I wouldn't want to be in the same position for 26 years. I feel like I have a vision, and if I can't get there, then maybe it's time for somebody else to do it. But if I spend 26 years representing my district and most people have no idea what I've done and what I've been working on, like, I haven't been doing my job. And that means I haven't reached people. I haven't helped them. They don't even, they can't even think of anything negative she's done. She's just been pretty much silent.
That certainly would not seem to be the place that I would want to be in. But as long as I'm here, if Congresswoman Maloney would like to come on and talk, I'm happy to have her on. But it does seem, it's just bleak. It's just very bleak.
Yeah.
And that's sort of why I'm trying to talk to as many people who are kind of up and coming in politics as I can, because to just sort of get a sense of where we may be headed, or
Mm-hmm.
or at least give my audience an idea of where we could be headed.
Totally. And I think with the petition that I have going right now, and I know that I have been a Bernie supporter, it's not, his movement is not necessarily him, and it hasn't been for quite some time. It's all of the people who are part of the movement fighting for things like Medicare for all and abolishing student debt so that isn't something that ruins the rest of your life, and making sure that nobody has to work 60 hours a week in 3 different jobs in order to barely pay rent, and that nobody's sleeping on the street. And it's so many things that if you're fighting for these things, you're part of a movement, and it's not one person, but like the petition exists because it is a movement, and with or without Bernie, his name still being on the ballot is allowing us to keep using our voice in a certain way. And every effort that is used to silence that voice is something that I'm going to fight against. So it's really like, I know I've said on my town hall recently and calls with volunteers and stuff, like, we're still going, and if anything, we're amping up, because there isn't Bernie leading it anymore. It's on all of us to carry the message on. And even if you weren't like a Bernie Sanders supporter, if you're on board with making sure that everybody's equal and lives in dignity, you're part of the fight too. So that's why we're just saying now more than ever, like, if you're watching and you're not really sure how to move forward, there's a lot of grassroots candidates across the entire country that are pushing this message forward. And if you want people who are going to stand up to whoever's in the White House and keep pushing them to prioritize us over the profit of their CEO buddies, then you got to send some of the grassroots candidates to Congress.
Do you think that the left is going to be fractured now? To certain, I mean, realistically, the figurehead, I guess, of the movement has failed to win the primary. This is the second time this has happened. So, I mean, are you already? I'm already hearing discussions about what direction does this go? I mean, do you have maybe you have a better sense of that than I do?
I think there are some opportunities to unify a little bit, at least. I know Medicare for All is one of them. Like, if the left sees that Joe Biden adopts actually universal health care and doesn't just expand upon an already broken system, then I think there could be some unification there. I know that there was talk about some student loan forgiveness. We have to forgive it all. And that's another thing that I'm fighting for, because there's so many circumstances of people that are over a certain income or were, and then lost everything because they got cancer. Literally, I was just talking to somebody about this. They don't qualify for the $1,200 because they are right above the threshold of getting it, and then lost everything because they got cancer. And it's very frustrating, because in so many ways, I'm seeing that means testing is just a way to maintain the status quo. If we really want to help people, let's help everyone. And then if you're worried about, oh no, we shouldn't have given free healthcare to billionaires, then tax them. We'll get that money back. Don't you worry. I'm coming for it. But we have to do it, and there shouldn't be any lines or divides or anything. Everyone should get healthcare. Everyone should not be afraid of getting the education they need to succeed in this world. Everyone should have internet. Everyone should have housing. The list goes on.
Well, Lauren Ashcraft, thank you very much for taking the time this morning and speaking with me.
Thank you.
And providing some sort of clarity in very troubling times.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure, and we're going to keep fighting through this thing and come out stronger on the other side. But we're just really seeing the need for this movement to stay sticking together right now.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you keep in touch.
Thank you. I absolutely will. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Take care.